Welcome to TeleTownHall. You're talking to Lisa Murkowski here. I appreciate everyone hopping on and giving up part of your Wednesday evening. Obviously, there is a lot going on here in Washington, D.C. as we move into a new administration. We have seen a flurry of executive orders and initiatives coming out of the White House, and coming from a state like Alaska that has a unusually high number of federal employees. I believe we're one of the top 3 in the country on a per capita basis, a state that relies significantly on federal programs and funds as part of our state's operation. These actions that we're seeing out of the administration are having big impact on Alaskans. And it's everything from orders on TikTok to renaming Denali to birthright citizenship. Again, the impact on federal funding, federal workforce. And so I have been asked by many Alaskans to have a more open communication to discuss some of these. I've had in the past several weeks a host of different Zoom outreaches, whether it's to tribal entities, to our communities through the Alaska Municipal League, our social service providers, immigration advocates, our federal employees, unions. But I think that the opportunity to hear directly from Alaskans by way of a town hall is important. It's important for me, and I think it is important for Alaskans around the state. So there may be a lot of you that are calling in just to listen, but those of you that would like to ask a question or deliver a message, I would ask that you press 0 to get into the queue. You will be instructed on how to proceed, but let's start getting those lined up right now. I'm just going to take a couple minutes at the top because, again, this is your turn to talk and for me to listen. But I wanted to let folks know that while there is much that is in play right now that we are tracking very carefully, some of it are things that Alaskans feel pretty favorably about. We're going to have some opportunities to do more with our Alaska energy and natural resource development. And then there's other things that we're hearing where people are anxious, they're confused, they're angry, they're really ticked off, in fact. They don't know where to turn, and there's a lot of unanswered questions. Certainly, with the recent and ongoing firing of our federal employees in the state. Again, I mentioned we got one of the highest percentages of federal employees in the country, and you know, these are our friends, these are our neighbors, these are people that are doing good work for us. The terminations appear to be, for the most part, indiscriminate. Some on probationary, but we're seeing more that there are beginning to be just across the board cuts. Again, these are for folks that have done good work, necessary work, important work, and have been rewarded in their work, and then they get a notice that says that their performance is poor and they're being terminated immediately. This is not how we treat any of our workforce. It's not how we treat our federal employees. They deserve better. They demand better, and it has been really very, very difficult as we have seen this unfold. Many of you have also called me and talked to me about federal funding for projects where the funding has been frozen or is now at risk. You're not getting a lot of guidance from the agencies. I wish that I could tell you that I had some magic wand or secret pipeline that could get more direct answers to a lot of these. know that we are working literally around the clock to try to get more specific responses, and sometimes with success, and that's important, and other times with the same level of success which you are getting, which is kind of crickets here. So I know I'm going to be asked tonight, well, what are you going to do about it? And some of you are going to suggest, hey, you just need to raise hell, you need to vote no on every nominee, you need to do an all-out offensive. Meanwhile, there's other Alaskans that feel that much of this is long overdue. They want me to confirm every nominee. They want me to support President Trump, and they want me to support Doja's effort to right-size the government. And I'm not going to promise to do either of these, but what I can promise is that every decision that I make is going to be with the best interests of Alaskans in mind. And I know it might not provide the comfort that you're asking, but with some of these nominees who are perhaps not, they would not have been my first pick, I have to figure out how, as your representative here in Washington, D.C., how I can have a relationship with people in the Trump administration. I need to be able to have people answer my phone call, respond to my texts, and help us out. I did that just this weekend with Secretary Kennedy. He was given a mandate to make a 10% reduction across the board throughout health and social services, and after we had our conversation, he committed to me that there were going to be no reductions at IHS, Indian Health Services, on his watch. It was important to have that line of communication. So I am going to anticipate a little bit of pushback on some of the nominees, and what I'm going to tell you right now is there's not going to be any questions here tonight that I'm going to say are too hard to answer or we're going to cut you off. I would ask that people be respectful in their comments, and also just know that others want to weigh in as well. So we'll try to keep comments or questions relatively brief so that we can get through as many folks as we possibly can. As I mentioned, if you want to weigh in, press 0, and you'll be put in line to talk with one of my staff members. We want to protect your privacy, so all you have to do is share your first name and the community that you live in and just the topic that you want to raise. And so once you get on, then and once you have a chance to ask your question, your mic will be muted so that you can listen to my response. So again, I want to hear from Alaskans across the state, and on any side of the issue, whether you support the administration, oppose them, or want to talk about something else, this is your time. So with that, I'm going to go to the first caller, Chris Ann in Sitka. Go ahead, Chris Ann.
Hi, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for your welcome letter that I received today, explaining that you will stand by the Constitution and defend it and uphold it, respecting the role of Congress and the separation of powers, etc. My question is, what steps will you specifically take to do that, to defend and uphold the Constitution in the crisis that we are in now? Time is of the essence. And how can I, as your constituent, support you in taking some really bolder steps?
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I've gotten very direct questions from folks. Do you think we're in a constitutional crisis? How bad is this? And I don't know how much in detail my letter was to you about my pledge to uphold the Constitution. But one of the things that I take very seriously, I serve in the legislative branch. We have a very distinct role here. We are we are tasked to not only do things like confirm the president's nominees through an advice and a consent process, not a rubber stamp process, but through advice and consent. We are directed to manage the power of the purse, if you will, and our duties are assigned by the Constitution, as is the executive, as is the court. And so when we in any one of the branches either overstep or in Congress's case cede our authorities, so if the president, for instance, should seek to withhold federal funding that has already been authorized and appropriated, that violates the Budget Act, it violates the Impoundment Act, and it cannot be allowed to stand. And so if we in Congress allow that, we effectively cede some of our authority. And so your question as to what do we do about it, we have to stand up. Now, the we has to be more than just me. And this is where it becomes more of a challenge, but it requires speaking out. It requires saying that violates the law, that violates the authorities of the executive. It also requires us to, whether it's speak out publicly or to use, again, I mentioned relationships earlier, the relationships that we have to go back to the executive and say, there is a way to accomplish what you are seeking, but you have to do it within the confines of the law. We all know that if that doesn't happen, that the place of next resort is the court. And the courts right now are the ones that are probably the busiest. I think there are no fewer than 75 different lawsuits that have been filed since the beginning of the new administration about different aspects of these executive orders and the DOJ activities. So we have an obligation to the Constitution, the oath that we swore to defend the Constitution, but also our authorities and our rules in it. So it requires speaking out and standing up, and that requires, again, more than just one or two Republicans. It requires us as a Congress to do so. Thanks, Chrisanne. We're going to go to Luann in Douglas.
Hi, this is Luann, and this is on behalf of myself and my husband, Richard Steele. And I want to thank you for taking this opportunity to listen to Alaskans and to share with us your ideas. I wanted to tell you that we are stunned that this DOJ committee is undermining federal power by laying off or firing federal workers. How do we turn this around, and what happens when members of Congress are dismissed from your offices by DOJ? Thank you.
Well, I don't know the answer to the last part of your question. I don't believe that DOJ would have the authorities, but we've been questioning. I've been questioning some of the means and methods of DOJ to this point in time. The reality of where we are with some of these firings is we've seen violations of the APA, the Administrative Procedures Act. We've seen violations of the civil service laws, which protect our federal employees. And so that's why you are seeing the number of lawsuits being filed as quickly as they are on behalf of federal employees. I just sent a letter to the three secretaries of the departments that my Interior Appropriations Subcommittee has oversight over, and I made clear to them that any realignment within their departments requires notice to us in Congress. It's a statutory time period that requires notice. So again, it's not to say that there is no authority to remove or request a reduction in forces, but there is a way that you are required to approach it, and that approach is with notice and in compliance, again, with the civil service laws and with the protections that we have in place as it relates to our employees and our federal employees. And you've got the legal aspect of it, but you also have the human side of it. I have had conversations directly with people. I have had letters and emails and text communications with those who have shared with me their proud service. They have worked for years in federal service, done exemplary work, and in fact so good that they are promoted. But then in this new position, they're considered a probationary employee, and now without anything, they get this abrupt termination that said your performance didn't meet sufficient standards, and so you are fired. You do not treat people in this manner who have been good public servants, and now they leave with not only no transition, but now a black mark on their employment record. There is, again, a way and a manner that we can address if we feel that we have a bloat in our system or redundancy in our system or inefficiency. We can address that. But you do it with respect and dignity towards people, and we are just not seeing that, and that's a shame. Let's go to Ian in Anchorage.
Hi, Senator. I have some concerns about the new budget resolution. I'm worried about there being budget cuts to social programs like Medicare and Medicaid and the SNAP program. I take care of my mother-in-law. She's in her 70s, and she relies upon Social Security and Medicare. And I'm just wondering what we can do about that in case they try and go for those programs.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. We know our rates of our costs of healthcare in Alaska are just so very high, and Medicaid is really important in our state. And so when discussions about cuts to Medicaid have come up, I have reminded people that things like per capita caps really hit states like Alaska very hard, small population states like ours. And so I've spoken out on this. I've also suggested that the Affordable Care Act premium tax credits that were put in place several years ago have really helped Alaskans to be able to afford some of these healthcare costs. So on Medicaid specifically, you should know that the president has made very clear as recently as yesterday, and then Vice President Vance was in front of our lunch today and kind of reaffirmed it on behalf of President Trump, that he has no intention of impacting Social Security, Medicaid, or Medicare. He did have a slight caveat that where there are instances of Medicaid fraud, they would go after that. That's understandable. But I think right now it is not something that is being considered on the Senate side. I do think that I know that on the House side it is being discussed as they're working through a different reconciliation bill, a bigger one that includes taxes, and they are looking to include Medicaid. So that is something that we are absolutely watching and monitoring. I think it's kind of in the weeds, but it might be just important just to know one of the rules that we have with reconciliation is that Social Security cannot be included as part of reconciliation. So that is absolutely off the table. But your point about Medicaid is well taken, and I have been one that has noted the very significant impact of Medicaid in our small population state. Okay, I'm going to go to one of my favorite hometowns. Let's go to Terry.
Hi, this is Terry from Girdwood. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Terry.
Nice to hear you. I run the food pantry in Girdwood, and I just got back from a fly into Juneau talking about the food and housing insecurity in our neighborhood. We also serve Whittier, Bird, and Indian and Hope. I'm really concerned because just this week we had 18 Girdwood locals laid off from the Forest Service Department. And I'm just worried about the increase of people that are unemployed that will be looking to food pantries and SNAP programs to help make sure that they have enough food to eat. And I'm worried about the funding for programs like the TFAP, the Emergency Food Assistance Program, and the Safety Program, which are federal programs where we get at least a third to a half of our food supplies. And it was rumored down in Juneau that those things might be being reduced or drying up, as well as SNAP. Are there going to be cuts to the SNAP program? Because now that we have millions of people suddenly unemployed, they'll be looking for help from the food pantries and food banks. And if we're also going to be getting rid of the programs that help fund and supply food to those programs, Americans are going to be going hungry, including our Alaskan neighbors.
Well, Terry, thank you for that. Thank you for the work that you do at the food bank. A couple really important things that you've raised. First, on some of the commodities program and TFAP and SNAP, some of the other food security programs. I can't tell you with any degree of certainty what may be coming with that with upcoming budgets, but you know there's real pressure on Congress to ratchet down spending. So we're looking at more austere budgets. How that's going to play out with regards to these very, very important safety nets, I think remains to be seen, but that's something that we're going to be looking at. We're also going to be dealing with, hopefully soon, the Farm Bill reauthorization that's going to be coming up. With regards to the pressures that we're going to see on some of the social services that are out there, I had a conversation earlier today with the head of the 4-Acre group, and they're focused specifically on nonprofits. But the point that you have made, that with this reduction in hiring, the layoffs that we're seeing, they really, it's one thing to be planning for your retirement. It's another thing to go home on Friday thinking that you're going to come back in on Monday and not have a job on Monday to go back to. So there's not been transition for these families. It's just boom, it's a cliff. And so we are going to be seeing pressure on not only our food banks, but I worry about the other social service providers out there who provide for families in time of need. You know, when you think about some of the challenges that happen when all of a sudden your world's kind of turned upside down, finances are really tight, families start arguing, you know, you've got domestic violence, you need to get to a safe place. But now the shelter is closed because the shelter had very little available funding. In the profile that was shared with me by 4Acre, it's things like shelters and food banks that have no cushion, so they can't make it from one month to the next unless they've got the generosity of good donors there. But they're going to be laying off their one or two employees, and then you don't have that safe haven for people who need to get out of a very difficult and challenged situation. So I'm worried. It's not just the federal employee who may be laid off. It's then the ripple effect of what happens next. And you combine that with the freeze in federal spending, the elimination of some of these programs that we have come to count on as communities, and you have a lot of vulnerable people. Okay, I'm back in Anchorage with Judy.
Hi, my name's Judy Green, and I'm from Anchorage. I'm just, I really want to understand what you're doing to fight this whole thing with Musk being in the government, and the fact that he really doesn't have a position that was authorized by the Senate, but yet he is making decisions about different departments and getting rid of people, even though they're saying that he isn't now. What exactly are you doing? Are you talking to other Republicans? What is the problem? Why aren't other Republicans? Why is it just you? Or, trying to fight this? Because I know earlier you said that, it has to be more than one person speaking out. What is happening?
Well, thank you for that. And, you're right. He is not, Musk is not somebody that we have, that the Senate has welcomed in. He is somebody that the president has brought on. He was given the designation of a special government employee. It's a limited status, but it does give him status as somebody who works as part of the executive branch and answers to the executive. His an SGE, or special government employee, is subject to 130-day tenure unless they are re-upped. And it is, in fairness, Judy, I had never heard of a special government employee until Elon Musk came around. I guess we've done it before when we've had, like, a drug czar, or somebody that was made a special advisor for a limited purpose in time. I think it is fair to say that what we are seeing with Mr. Musk in this position is absolutely unprecedented. To be honest with you, it's one of these situations where wouldn't we all like to make sure that you've got a level of review and oversight conducted by somebody who is focused on that and nothing more. But Musk is not he's not a person who has really been part of the federal government system. He's a private individual that has done extraordinarily well. It's got to be just kind of the height of irony that the world's wealthiest person is one who is making the overall decisions about whether or not people in Anchorage, Alaska, have a job. I think you can tell I'm not particularly pleased with this, what we've seen with this delegation of authority. But it is something that the executive does have the ability to bring on individuals in this capacity. But he doesn't have unfettered authority, just as the president himself does not have unfettered authority. And so Elon Musk also has to follow the laws. So it is again, does it pass the federal civil service laws the way that these terminations are coming about? I don't believe so, and I think that's why you see the number of cases that are being filed in the court. There is I just read tonight that there is a big class action suit that has, I believe it has just been filed, or maybe they're still in the formation stages of it. But again, it goes back to the very first question about just the constitutional balance here, and it doesn't make any difference if you're the president or if you're somebody who's been tasked by the president to take on a function. We all have to operate within the laws, and when you fail to operate within the laws, there are consequences to that. Okay, I'm going to go to, wait a minute, I lost the name here, Shirley in Anchorage.
Hi, I'm Shirley Mickelson in Anchorage. I've worked in two areas, tourism and education. As I know that, first of all, I'm just extremely thankful for your courage and your balance and trying hard to represent us. I try to express that to you often, but I'm concerned the tourism industry that I've worked in, that we, as you well know, have the largest national forests, the largest parks, and of course we're a seasonal tourism industry and very much need temporary service employees who are very qualified to do their jobs, and we need a lot of them to have a good quality tourism. So I'm certainly hoping that you can at least express that we are a lot of federal lands and we need the federal employees to do those jobs. I'm also extremely concerned Title I education in a state that has a lot of languages represented in our schools. Mm-hmm. We work hard to educate and to bring students up to where they need to be, but they need the extra tutoring and the extra things that come along with Title I programs. So I just hope that and want to express that we really need two senators that would speak up for some of these things. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Shirley. And I appreciate what you said about, the number of federal employees that we have for our public lands. And we got about 60-some-odd% of our state that is under public land management, whether it's Forest Service, Park Service, BLM, Refuge. I will say that we have made a little bit of headway. I've been going back and forth with the Secretary of the Interior with regards to Park Service employees as well as wildland firefighters. Park Service folks, probationary, seasonal, were laid off. That has been retracted now, recognizing that we've got to get our seasonal workers back on. And in a communication that we got today, those particularly within Park Service can reapply now. So it's not something that I want to say to people who had a job and now need to go back and reapply on usajobs.gov. But I do think that it is going to be important, to your point, to make sure that not only do we have these folks back in our parks or out on our Forest Service lands, to make sure that they're maintained, whether it's working the trails or making sure that the restrooms are cleaned out. But think about the impact to our gateway communities that are right outside the parks. You know, whether you're Healy or Cantwell, whether you're Skagway, it's important that our parks are going to be up and operational for all of our visitors. So I'm a little worried that we're already behind time with regards to seasonal hires for Park Service, and so having a push as quickly as we can on this, I think is going to be important. But I'm worried. We know that the timeline for hiring seasonal workers is not a quick one, and so if people are interested, I would just urge expediency here. But I'm worried about the impact that we're going to see on the state as it relates to our tourism. It makes me kind of feel like we're going back to the summer of COVID, where our tourism sector just got brought to its knees, and you know, if we don't have the workers that we need, it could be a tough summer, a tough time for us. I had a confirmation hearing with the Secretary of Labor nominee today. I raised the issue of H-2B visas for seasonal workers in this state. I've talked about it in the framework of seafood processors, but we also need them for our tourism workers. So these are things that we're going to keep pushing on, but we've got to have people in place in order to have the tourist economy that we rely so heavily on. So thank you for that. Let's go back to Sitka. Alicia.
Hi. Thank you, Senator, for this opportunity, and thank you for being an advocate. Really grateful for all of your hard work and for being a voice in these chaotic times. I appreciate that we have just a one question. I have many questions, but I'll go with the one question. And I wanted to just focus on a question that I haven't heard asked, and but it's similar to some of the other questions that are being asked about federal employees. As a constituent in rural Alaska, we rely on air travel for medical, for tourism, for day-to-day, for prisoner transport, for supplies, for everything. And particularly being like a resident on Baranof Island, I'm most dependent on personally for work and for family medical. With the recent firings with regards to FAA and the firings of the heads of the administration by the president, and these random budget cuts and the reclassification of people into the new jobs and then being fired as probationary employees, I'm very concerned that our safety is going to be compromised as a state. And I know this is a hard question, but I would love to hear what your next steps are to address this. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's an important one. Important down in Sitka. It's important all over the state. We just fly. This is how we move around, and well, I know there's been a lot of attention on some tragedies, not the least of which was up in Nome, which just was simply awful. Flying is still one of the safest modes of transportation, but we need to make sure that we don't ever take that for granted. We need to have the men and women in place to ensure that. We need to have the technologies in place, and right now, our systems are not what they need to be. We had a press conference about 10 days or so ago with the Secretary of Transportation, and I was able to share with him that on any given day last year, at least 50 of the 150 aviation weather observing stations was out of order, not working, and not just down for a day, but potentially down for weeks and months at a time. And we have kind of come to normalize the fact that we just have an inadequate system in many parts of the state at any given time. So your concern about compromising safety when we're trying to bring about reductions in spending and reduction in workforce is legitimate. It was a good conversation with the Secretary. It was important. I think he gets very, very clearly that you can't fire your air traffic controllers if you're going to keep people flying safely in the air. I know there is concern about FAA employees being fired, and we are looking at that one very, very carefully. But I think there is a heightened focus right now on aviation safety across the country. So my hope is that as again the administration is looking to make cuts within agencies, that they consider what that means to overall aviation safety. I want to make sure that what we're doing in Alaska, particularly with our AWOS and our ASOS systems, our weather observing systems, and how we rely on these technologies. I want to make sure that people in this administration know that we cannot compromise further, that the safety of people flying in rural places like Unalakleet is just as important as the safety of people that are flying into Washington, D.C. So we passed the FAA reauthorization last year. There was a whole bunch of Alaska-specific fixes in it. We need to make sure that we appropriate to that, and that's why we've got to get this appropriations bill for FY25 done and over the finish line, because an authorization is nothing but a nice law on paper. We need to fund it, and we need to get the safety systems that Alaskans deserve. Let's go to Liz in Petersburg.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Senator Murkowski, and I want to put a plug in for Emma in your office in D.C. She's been very kind and gracious, taking several of my calls over the past month.
Thank you.
I'm going to change a little bit up here and ask about the veteran care in Alaska, and I know it has evolved quite a bit over the last 20 years or so since 9/11, because it was kind of a haphazard process to get veterans evaluated and get them to higher levels of care. And my husband's a veteran, I'm a veteran. We've got several of them in our family that are receiving care also through VA and other states. And when I looked at Project 2025, the playbook addresses ways to cut the VA by looking at reasons for being qualified for service-connected disabilities. And that really concerns me, because those are non-veterans or non-medical people that are pushing for change that really needs to happen within the VA system. And as an aside, we live in Southeast, so my husband travels by Alaska Airlines to get up to care in Anchorage, and if the Essential Air Service gets cut, it'll be very difficult for me to fly with him. The VA pays his fare, but not necessarily mine, and I need to travel with him at times. So that's kind of a twofold question there about the VA care and the sanctity of caring for our veterans in not just Alaska but across the country, and Essential Air Service. And I'll stand by for your answer. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Both good questions here. On the VA, I have heard the same rumor, and I don't know whether it's where it stems from, but I have not had discussion nor seen discussion here in the Senate when we're talking about our veterans and disability benefits. I am not hearing that there is this effort. There would be an effort to undermine that. As I'm saying all this, I'm recognizing that we are but a month into a new administration, and an administration that is very keen on looking for ways to reduce spending. I would certainly hope that one of those ways to reduce spending would not be on the backs of the men and the women who wear the uniform and who have served us, and during their service have suffered levels of disability. So that is something that I think you can count on your delegation here to be standing up for you on. On Essential Air Service, this is one of the programs that I'll be honest with folks. I've been worried that in a DOGE environment that looks pretty enticing. It is basically a subsidization of air service, right? That's what it's about, and it is there for a purpose. It is there in recognition of the geographic considerations that you have when you have limited methods for people and mail and services to move around. So I am keeping a very close eye on Essential Air. I know full well, my folks still live down there in Wrangell. Getting in and out of our small islanded communities is not cheap at all. And it would, for many, be almost impossible if Essential Air Service was not there. And that goes for everything else that comes in and out of those communities. So I hear what you're saying on Essential Air Service. In all frankness, I worry a little bit about bypass mail. Once again, it is a subsidy, but it is something that for a state that is 1/5 the size of the United States of America, where 82% of our communities are not connected by road, you've got to have a way to move things around, goods and people, and it requires a level of support, but it is unique to Alaska. And when people are looking for efficiencies, sometimes they just look and say, well, there's not a lot of people there, and it costs a lot of money, and so this can go. This is where you need a very strong and united delegation to defend the programs, defend the purposes, and defend the people. Okay, we're going to go to Eagle River with Dave.
Good afternoon, Lisa. This is Dave Owens. Good to talk to you.
Hey, Dave, how are you?
I'm doing okay.
Probably a rhetorical question.
Thank you for all the work you do. I just got
you.
one thing. I've been talking to a lot of, obviously as a rep, I've been talking to a lot of fellow employees, and I'll tell you right now, one of the things that really makes them very aggravated is when they get the notice for removal that you haven't been doing your job, you're not adequate, your performance is substandard, and their performance ratings from their supervisor for the last year has been fantastic. They have tremendous pride in the job, and now they're being told they're being kicked to the side, and that's basically one reason. It should have been done a lot different. Now, the other issue on the impact on Alaska is we got over basically 1,378 probationary employees, and a lot of them DOD, 294 in the Air Force, 191 in the Army, and I'm hearing right now that they're going to start looking at DOD next. But listen to some of the other questions. I do want to bring up an issue, and I represent a lot of firefighters, and they know a lot of wildland firefighters that work every summer. And they had a hiring freeze for all the wildland seasonal firefighters that come in to basically stop the fires. And as you know, as anybody else in Anchorage right now, the Idrod's being moved because we've got lack of snow. And that would really make the fire season pretty dangerous in Alaska. So we're hoping that your connections with the interior, that they may get off of that and get the people hired, because if not, we may see Anchorage burning. So thank you again for your time.
Well, thanks, Dave, and thanks for what you do. I know you're trying to do a lot of reach out to a lot of your folks, so I appreciate that. On the wildland firefighters, again, this is something that I've been communicating with Secretary Burgum about, and there's a recognition that we cannot do without our seasonal wildland firefighters, and so again, they have moved to get that freeze unfroze. I don't know the right way to say that. But my fear is that you've got those that now need to come back into the system, and it's not an easy process to do it unless the department is able to do something directly and bring people back on, kind of bypassing the USA jobs.gov. And I don't know. I just don't know if that is the case. And as we know, our fire season is getting earlier every year. And to your point about what we've seen across the state this year, we're all worried about the conditions that we're facing. So in my view, there's an urgency here to getting the firefighters back on. I'm going to just segue just a little bit from the question, though, because one of the things that I'm hearing is, well, we can go back in and we'll bring in some of the seasonals, or we'll things are frozen, or things are terminated, and then people are given an opportunity to come back on. It kind of goes back to what I said earlier about just respecting your workforce and how they're treated, because what I'm hearing is a real legitimate drop in morale. Like, people are looking at and having conversations and saying, why would I even want to go back? Why would I want to put myself in a situation where I may be working my hardest at a job that I really like, and I'm told that I'm good, and then boom, I'm fired by somebody I've never even met, literally by an email, and my life is turned upside down. Do I really want to go through this again? And so I'm concerned about our ability to meet the need, whether it's getting our seasonal workforce back in place to fight fires or to keep our parks open, or whether it's the folks in BLM to process the permits that we're going to need to move forward within the NPRA. I worry about the morale of our federal workforce. Let's go to Jennifer in Anchorage.
Thank you, Senator Murkowski, for hosting this tonight. I would like to express my dismay over the president's stance on Ukraine, including, as everyone knows, his outright falsehoods. And I'm curious, I imagine I know what your views are, but more significantly, what can the legislative branch do, and what do they have the stomach for to support a peaceful resolution that involves the leaders of Ukraine and not just Trump and Putin? That's my question.
Yeah, well, I think we were all more than a little bit stunned, really concerned about just this radical switch. I mean, it was literally last week. The president was speaking about how he was going to work to end the war in Ukraine. I think we would all like to see we would like to see a peaceful and positive outcome to the bloodshed after these years. It is clearly time, but as President Zelensky has said, we got to be at the table. We got to be part of the conversation. Nothing about us without us. And so to now hear President Trump's comments, very derisive comments about President Zelensky today, I felt were uncalled for and unfortunate. It is wrong to suggest that somehow or other Ukraine started this war, asked for this war. It is clear for all the world to see and to know that Putin invaded Ukraine and started the war. And they did it in Ukraine just as they did with the invasion of Crimea. And over this time, Ukraine has fought valiantly. They have defended their sovereignty. They clearly have earned their right to sit at the negotiating table. And so I have been strong in my support for Ukraine. I think one of the things that we have learned from President Trump, from his first administration, and really just from his life, he's a negotiator. He is a tough negotiator, and sometimes his negotiating tactics are perhaps a little bit unorthodox, and maybe that's some of what we're seeing with his words now. But I think we're all kind of scratching our heads at how quickly the conversation has gone from being one that is supportive of President Zelensky to now being more supportive of Putin. Okay, going up to Fairbanks, Karen.
Hi there. Yes, this is Karen from beautiful snowy Fairbanks. And
that gets the Iditarod.
What's that? Yeah, we got that.
I know, so lucky.
Yeah, so we got sled dogs and we love it, and we've had a pretty decent winter. So don't tell anybody. Anyway, I want to thank you for the town hall, and also, what I've been hearing throughout this conversation is your independence on these issues, on several of these issues, and I want to let you know that it's appreciated, that this whole party division is really injurious, and I like to see our representatives take issue by issue. And so I have called you frequently and sent you emails regarding my concerns, so I would like to go in a little more personal direction. I am a retired federal employee, and although not perfect, I have a lot of respect for federal agencies, and probably most importantly, I have a lot of trust. I've had a lot of trust in a lot of the processes, and I've always trusted in government following the Constitution, including my own personal oath. I don't feel that way anymore. And so my comments tonight are more personal. Myself and my friends, we're all very anxious. We're living in fear and constant anxiety. I think one of the things for me that has caused me to take some actions is the what I'm hearing about the potential breach, quite frankly, of our personal information, Social Security numbers and banking accounts, etc., which I know is being worked out in the courts. But it has instilled a lot of fear, financial fear, for those of us who are no longer working. For me, I've frozen my credit. I've locked my retirement benefits. I've put extra security on my bank and my credit card accounts, and this is how I'm living. And that is not, in my mind, what government is for. When I worked for the government, it was to provide a sense of safety, a sense of guidance, for good health and for freedoms and for enjoyment. And I don't feel that way anymore. And so I guess I want to ask you what, other than the courts, if there is anything that the legislative branch can do regarding what does appear to be across the board in several agencies, the breach of private information by individuals that I don't see were authorized to have access to that information, nor do I see a real purpose in having that information. So thanks again.
Well, thank you, Karen. A lot in here, and as to the specifics of confidential information, whether it's within Social Security or the IRS, the fact of the matter is that we should be able to trust our government with our confidential information and data, whether it is student loan records, whether it's IRS, again, whether it's Social Security, whether it's your health care, we should be able to trust that. And we know that malicious actors, when they want to try to get us from the outside, they go after our data. It ought not be our own government that makes us be in fear that we have lost that security. This is a real concern for me right now. Now, we are told that, for instance, with the Treasury Department, when DOJ went in and gained access to certain information, that it was a read-only authorization. The explanation that has come back, there is an explanation that has come back. Some would suggest, well, it's not entirely believable. But what we've seen here is something that is unprecedented. And that's where I think people are concerned. So even if it was only read only, why were they seeking the information in the first place? And when we can't trust our own government, that's when we have the real breakdown. Again, I'm going to take it back to the very first question about constitutional crisis and constitutional issues. We need to be able to trust our government. And in fairness, a lot of what I think President Trump is trying to do is he's trying to bring back some of the credibility within certain institutions. I know that within the intelligence world, within law enforcement, we feel like we've had some breaches of trust there. And so if you just root it all out, can you restart? But when you take out the underpinnings of those who are in place to kind of provide a protection. I mean, one of the first things that we saw was the firing of the IGs. I think there were 8 or 9 of them that were fired like right off the bat. And these are the ones that are the watchdogs, the independent watchdogs that are just making sure that everything is on the up and up. We rely on them from the perspective of the legislative branch, other government agencies, and the public rely on them. And so if we're going to restore trust, if we're going to restore credibility, then we've got to have a level of transparency. We have to believe that our government is working for us and with us and not against us. I hear the anxiety in your voice, and know, Karen, that I share it. I feel like I've got a responsibility to Alaskans to try to be your eyes and your ears here, and to understand as much of what's going on as I can. And it's a lot, and I'm not just taking it all for face value. I'm asking a lot of questions, and some questions that people don't like hearing. So we'll just keep at it. Okay, we are coming up on we're actually beyond the time, but let's go ahead. Let's get one more. Let's go to Dottie in Soldotna.
Hi. Yes, I'm surprised. Yeah, I'm calling. I'm one of these that's frustrated, angry, and heartbroken. I'm a lifelong Alaskan, lived in the rural areas, Bristol Bay. Although I live in Soldotna, Bristol Bay was my home for 25 years, and I have children who were born and raised there. One of my children is a 30-year career National Park Service employee who was fired 4 years from retirement from Lake Clark National Park. Lake Clark Park was the home of his ancestors, for millennia or whatever. And, before the park was even formed, before Alaska was even purchased by the United States. And so he was a local hire. He grew up within the system. He knows it so well, and he loves it. And now he has lost his job 4 years before retirement, and lost his retirement. All because of a promotion. All because he was promoted to supervisor of maintenance. He is responsible for all the facilities, for all the, other people. He opens all the cabins. Yeah, I could go on and on here. And I'm just wondering, what recourse does he have? He's frozen out of his personnel files. They're one of these. He was one of these that was told, well, you haven't met expectations or whatever it is. You kidding? He's met them for so long with all kinds of, commendations, and then he gets promoted for it, and then this comes along. What does he do now?
Well, Dottie, I'm really glad that we continued this call, because just before this TeleTownHall tonight, I was reading through all the stacks of things that have come in, and I got an email about, I'm almost 100% sure. Is your son's name Warren? Oh, you might be off the line. Yeah, okay. So yes, I have been read in fully, and this is one of those issues that we look at and we say, this is exactly why the process is so bad and so wrong and so fouled. And I think you should know a couple things. First of all, when I found out that many of the probationary status people that were let go in Alaska, many of them were what we call ANILCA local hires, which your son was an ANILCA local hire, and for all the right reasons, as you said, living out there. And I raised this earlier with one of the folks from the White House, and asked him to look specifically into this, that there is a reason that we put into law this local hire preference that is specific to Alaska, and it is specific to employees that we bring on for our public lands, and just said, these people should not be subject to the same kind of termination. So I am bringing his particular case up to the Secretary of the Interior. I brought it up to the head of the Office of Management and Budget, who's dealing with many of these employee matters. And the email that I got, I'm going to share directly with them. And as I say that, I think, isn't it just wild that this is what we're having to do, that literally you've got to call your member of Congress about an individual to try to get recourse for them with a termination process that was just wrong. And you have asked what rights your son has or others that have been terminated. Unfortunately, probationary employees don't have an appeal process, but they do have some rights under the Merit Systems Protection Board regulations. They're able to submit a grievance to the Merit Systems Board. And again, it's hard, because I think the approach that has been taken is you go after those who are on probation and they don't have the full civil service protections that other federal employees have. But I will tell you that I will follow up with you if we can get more information, maybe for you after the call. I want to raise this as an example of those matters that need to be directly addressed. And I'm told that my chief of staff actually left Warren a voicemail today. So we will address this, but again, your son deserves better, and we're going to work to see if we can't help. And we're gonna have to sign off now. We're over our hour. People have been fabulous to stay on. We've had over 1,000 people participating and listening. I think that's great. If you wanted to weigh in, once we sign off on this call, if you want to stay on the line, then you will go to a voicemail, and that voicemail will take your message. Our staff will then take that and either do a direct follow-up with you, but we'll be getting all the feedback from anything that is left after this call. So again, if it's a question, that's great. We'll try to respond to it. And if you just want to weigh in and give us your comments, we're happy to take that too. But I really appreciate that so many Alaskans have called in. I think we had a really diverse cross-section of issues that are presented. There's a lot on people's mind. I know that there's a lot that folks are thinking about, and it's kind of rough and choppy out there right now, but we're going to be moving through things, and know that my commitment to you is to be as responsive as I can. If I don't know the answers, I'm just going to tell you. And if there's any way that we can help, we're going to try to be responsive. But I can better represent you when I hear directly from you. So thank you for that. And whoever gave the shout out to Emma, I have two young women here in Washington, D.C., Emma and Heather, who work the front lines, and they do a great job. They're hearing from a lot of Alaskan constituents, as well as all the people working the phones back home. So thank you for being kind to them, and thank you for the privilege to serve you. Thanks so much, and have a good night.